Gardens, the library lecture series, different topics each time. So, but do remember it helps to show up early to make sure you get a seat. Sometimes they're full, but the lectures are always noon to 1. And so today we've got Luke Alfaro. He's the city arborist with the city of Tyler. Also has a degree in forestry from Stephen F. Austin State University, Axum Jacks. And so now I have a degree from forestry, so we both have degrees from SFA in forestry. Pretty cool, huh? So, yeah, I'm cursed. I got a degree in floriculture, horticulture, and forestry. So, anyway, so Luke's going to talk to us about all the kinds of stresses that we get on trees around here. And so there's only one answer we're giving people when they call our office about why is my plant dying these days, and we say it's too wet, too dry, too cold, and too hot. That's the problem. And that's why they're dying. So your job is to tell them what to do about it. Look how Alfaro.
All right, well, can everybody hear me fine in the back? Good?
Yeah.
Okay. I never know how close to hold the mic to my mouth, so. But thank you all for being here. I'm really glad to be presenting this to a bunch of people who want to learn about trees, but not only trees, just about natural resources. And so really excited to be here, and so we'll go ahead and get started. For some of you, you might have already seen this presentation. If you were, I can't even remember when I gave it last time, but you might have already seen it, but I made a couple tweaks to it, so it's a little bit different. But he gave me a little introduction. I graduated from Stephen F. Austin State University, and I actually have a degree in forest wildlife management, so I don't really exactly do what I have my degree in. Graduated in 2020. Which was interesting with COVID. All your classes going from in-person to online, and your professors also learning how to use technology. You think they would know how, but they really don't. And so, you have a 30-question test that they give you 30 minutes. That's not enough time. So when I graduated from SFA, I started at the Texas A&M Forest Service in Jasper, way southeast Texas. And I worked there for about 2.5 years, 2 years or so as a district forester, kind of doing more rural forestry stuff, management plans. And I decided I kind of wanted to change, and so this opportunity came about with the city of Tyler as an arborist and urban forester. So I've been here for 2 years on this May, so I'm still kind of getting used to it. And I also supervise the medians, so we have a medians crew. I'm also over Grande, Old Omen, all those medians in Tyler, and the landscape plantings on Broadway and the Loop. So don't be mad at me, we're working on them. I know that some of them do not look great. It's a work in progress. And so this is very informal. Please ask questions, raise your hand, yell at me, throw something at me, I don't care. It's very informal. So the agenda today, we're going to be talking about environmental tree stressors, site-related tree stress, human cause, what we do, and then some prevention and mitigation to kind of lower the stress on our trees. So I like to start this out with my definition of a healthy tree. So I think the baseline is, how can we determine if a tree is stressed or unhealthy if we don't know what a healthy tree looks like? And so in my opinion, and doing some research, a healthy tree has a very well developed crown, which is typically 1/2 to 1/3 of the tree is full of crown. So if you see any less than 1/3 of the tree, you might start to look at it and say, okay, what's wrong with my tree? Maybe why is the crown so sparse, or just why is it so small? And then you want to look at the leaves, and this depends on the tree. Some trees have darker leaves, some trees have lighter leaves, but if you have full dark green leaves, that's kind of one of the characteristics that you look for. You want to look for a uniform shape. Go on Google, look up your tree, see what it typically looks like. That could depend, on the site and on pruning, but typically you want to have a uniform shape. And then just look at the tree, look at the trunk. Is it free of damage? Is it damaged from lawnmowers, weed eaters, spray paint? Is it girdled from a chain that's been, wrapped around the tree for 30 years? So just look at those things and to determine if your tree may be healthy or not. So the first one, I moved this slide up because it's so cold outside. And so freeze damage can cause a lot of stress on trees. And so what happens is sometimes you get a late spring frost, and these trees begin to put out new leaves and start to get things moving inside the tree. And so these newly emerged leaves, can get frozen, causing the cell walls to kind of burst. Those leaves die, and so this tree has to expend extra energy to create those new leaves. So it's already used a lot of energy to put out the leaves for the spring. Well, a freeze comes, and it has to use more energy. So this can cause stress on a tree. And then obviously, right here, you see the tree that's broken. That's definitely not good for it. So that one's pretty obvious. And so you can have a reduction in tree canopy, and then a reduction in energy production because it's having to put out new leaves and new tissue. And so you see this tree right here. This is actually at our Rose Hill Cemetery, which is off of Broadway. And we had a bad freeze, I think it was 3 years ago, maybe 4? Yeah, 2021, everybody here remembers. I wasn't here when that happened, so it didn't exist to me. But this tree, to me, this looks like textbook freeze damage. You see all the outer limbs are dead and brittle, and they have no leaves on them, basically because they froze, and all those branches died. So it's kind of putting out some new growth to respond to that freeze damage. Second one is drought. This tree looks like a pretty a tree that was suffered from drought damage, and so obviously it's a lack of rain, and then additionally it can be from inadequate soil space. So even though there may be a lack of rain, a lot of trees in urban areas just don't have the soil space like they would in a forest or in a natural setting, and so with a decrease of the amount of soil that it has available to it, and then a lack of rain, this definitely causes stress. And so what happens is these trees can lose the fine absorbing roots that are in the kind of the upper layers of the soil. And so what does this tree do? It kind of goes into survival mode, right? It's like, okay, I need to survive. How do I do that? Well, it may start shedding its leaves, show some early fall color, and this can lead to possible pest or disease. And so oftentimes I get a lot of calls, it's like, well, this insect killed my tree, why did it do that? Well, usually a lot of these pests are what you call like a secondary invader. They're not the ones who kill the tree. Well, they will finish the tree off, but something is causing stress on that tree to where that insect would attack this tree. All trees have a natural defense mechanism of some sort, whether it's the bark or sap. And so these insects are going to find the trees that are the weakest and take those out first because they're easier. And I'm sure a lot of people have seen this too, sun scald and frost cracking. This is common. This is a common issue in young thin bark species. Anybody have any idea of what maybe those species would be? Thin bark species?
Maple.
Yep. Okay. Maple, oaks. Yeah, those are some good ones. Beeches. Anything that has really thin bark are very susceptible to this sun scald or frost cracking. And so there's kind of two possible reasons or trains of thought of why this happens. And so if you have a newly planted or a young tree that has thin bark, the bark tissue can actually get dehydrated from hot sun, whether it's reflected off of the pavement or it's just really hot. It gets 102, 103 degrees outside, at least in East Texas. And then additionally, the bark can heat up during the day, causing a break in dormancy during the winter, and the freezing temperatures at night can kill the tissue. So there's kind of two different schools of thought. Maybe it's both of them, and this can lead to pests or diseases. Doesn't look very good. You can see that all this right here is the heartwood that's exposed. What's hard about this sun scald and frost cracking is it's sometimes not immediately evident. You don't know that it's happened until several years later. You may see a little crack in the bark or something, but it's sometimes really hard to see at first.
Does that lead to imminent death?
Well, it's not always imminent death. I see a lot of trees that have this that have lived for a long time, and I think you have to use your judgment on number one, how young the tree is, how big the spot of damage is. It's definitely a weak spot. It's definitely not good for the tree. So if it's a newly planted tree and you see that it did that, maybe it's just easier to replace it. If it's a large area, or if it's a small area, maybe just let the tree go and see if it can seal over that wound.
Does it look like it's trying to seal it over there?
It is. So not very good with my left hand.
Two sides?
So you can see where it's kind of rounded here. The tree has some response wood that it is trying to grow over that and close up that wound, but obviously it would be better if this just didn't happen at all. And so I see this a lot. I see this in neighborhoods where you have maples that are planted right next to streets, and it's pretty common issue. And you can see that this is also a maple. So site-related tree stressors, I just pulled this image from Google. So the first one is soils, and this is a really, really big one. Urban soils are usually disturbed, degraded, and contaminated during construction. And so they're graded, they're excavated, the soils, and then they're placed back in all these strange different orders. You have clay that's on top that used to be on the bottom. And this is typically not good for a tree that's been growing in the same type of soil for a long time. Then you come in and kind of change that mix for it. So it can lead to compaction, infertile soils, poorly aerated, and you can have, what I see a lot is a high clay content, because clay is kind of a good foundation for houses and for pads and all these different types of things. So you can have poor drainage, a lack of pore space, which means there is very little oxygen, and that means the roots have no reason to go to that soil if there's no oxygen, and then so less roots equals stress. So roots obviously need oxygen and water, and so if they don't have one of those two things, the roots are not going to kind of go into that space and kind of go close to the surface. So I want to ask, what are some things that you see in this image? I know it's kind of small, but what are some things that you see that may not be good for this tree? Okay, yeah, we have stuff piled up around it that could cause compaction, contamination.
Looks like it's going to be close to pavement. It's not there yet.
It does look like that. Yeah, it looks like they're going to pour a driveway somewhere there. So once the driveway's poured over it, it's going to be an area where not much water is going to get to those roots and cause compaction. Anything else?
Heavy equipment going all around it.
Yep, compaction, heavy equipment.
The dirt too far up on the trunk.
For sure, yep. The dirt looks like it's kind of slowly being pushed up on these roots. So I doubt that there was that much soil there at first. And it's really hard to see, but I see like some buckets here, maybe some gas, and anybody who has poured gas into any type of equipment knows that it's really easy to spill gas, and so more likely there's some contamination in these soils. So yeah, just not super good for this tree.
Are there multiple trees together?
Yeah, that looks like some kind of elm tree that just has either a ton of trees coming out of the base of it, or just kind of a bunch of codominant. Elms typically grow like that. And then soils continue. You can have, if the soil stays wet for a long time, you can have anaerobic respiration, and it can cause buildup of compounds to toxic levels. And I think I have some of these. And then you have de-icing salts. Not really too much of an issue around here. We may get salts on the road like once a year, maybe, but it's usually not enough to do too much damage. But the further north you go, obviously, that the soils can get contaminated with roots, and all these issues cause stress to the tree. This tree in the picture, you can see that it's lifted this sidewalk, and everybody wants to blame the tree, but more than likely the soil is really compacted and it's having a hard time getting actually deep enough. But additionally, this is how trees grow. A lot of them grow kind of closer to the surface, and the sidewalk was likely just put a little bit too close to this tree, but it's always the tree's fault. So.
Nobody anticipating how the tree's going to grow.
Of course.
When it's planted in that spot.
Yeah, that's it.
When it was little.
Right. And so, lastly, when we look at the site, we look at space. Trees are always in competition for space in an urban environment. That's below ground and above ground. Below ground, they're dealing with compaction, they're dealing with streets, and so there's not enough room for all their roots to go out. And then above ground, you have utilities, roads, buildings, streetlights, signs, power lines. And who typically wins that battle? Yeah, utility companies, power line companies typically win that. And so this tree has had probably a quarter, if not more, of its canopy taken away because of this power line.
Why is it that they allow, I guess it would be the landscape for developers in housing developments? When you've got an electric, when you've got a power line right there, they plant the trees, the young new trees, right under them. So that when those trees mature, they're gonna come through and just, chop them up because they're interfering with the electrical line. Why do they allow that to happen? Why don't they place the tree further back?
Yeah, so the question was, if anybody can't hear, why do they allow trees to be planted under a power line when they know it's going to grow at least as tall, if not taller than that power line? So that's a good question. We're still trying to figure that out, but it's, I think it's just a lack of education on the part of the companies who are designing these plans. I think they have a list of trees that they typically pick from, and they don't see the power lines, they don't see all these things. They see a space that's on a sheet of paper that needs to be filled with a tree. So it's an issue, and it's something that needs to be worked on to where people are inspecting those trees to say, hey, you planted a live oak underneath a 25-foot power line. This isn't going to work. This needs to be replaced. So it's a work in progress. I know that some cities have made really good progress on doing this, where they go out and they inspect every time a tree is planted, at least on commercial property. On private property, there's not a whole lot that you can do because it's their property. You can't go inspect every tree that's planted. But I would just say it's a lack of education, but maybe just they don't care too much. They're just putting a tree in a spot and going. So. Okay, this is my favorite one because sometimes we are the problem. A lot of times, actually.
It's got a power line over the top of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Too bad it's not a great myrtle.
No.
Great murder, right?
Yeah, that's it. Right. So this actually looks like a Bradford pear, so I'm actually okay with this. I'm actually okay with that. I don't like these trees very much. They should have just took it a little bit lower. Yeah. So one of them is planting issues. There's nothing wrong with this picture. This is from my Arbor Day. I just found a picture of them planting a tree. And so you have trees that are planted too deep. You have burlap and cages that are left in place on the trees. You have roots that are not cut, and I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. You have volcano mulching, and then you just have stakes and guying of those trees. So the first one is trees that are planted too deep. And at first this looks kind of okay, but typically every tree has a root flare at the base of it. And I'm going to kind of draw this if I can. And so typically you have some type of flare at the base of this tree, and more than likely this one is buried, which can encourage rot and insects and disease problems in the future. So this tree is planted too deep. You want to see that tree have a little bit of flare at the bottom of it when it's planted. Okay, so this was another picture off Google, not mine. But what do you notice about this that I just talked about?
Burlap tall.
Yeah, so it looks like it had a pretty, the root system looks really big in this context, but you look at the size of this tree and the crown of this tree, and to me it doesn't look as proportional as it should be. Now this could be for a lot of different reasons, but you can see that this burlap was left in place, and if someone tries to tell you, oh, it'll go away with time, well, at least this one didn't. So always take off the cages and the burlap before planting, and make sure that this does not happen. Yep.
Going back to the one before that was planted too deep, what can you do to mitigate that when a tree is that big, bit of the ground that long?
It's a good question. So what can we do to fix this? Well, You would want to do some type of root collar excavation. You can get like a little hand trowel or just something where you can kind of dig that soil out and expose that root flare. If it's pretty severe and it's on a very large tree, certain certified arborists, or it doesn't even have to be a certified arborist, but certain companies have a what's called like air excavation. It's basically like a big air hose that can go in and kind of blow that soil out and excavate that root. So this looks like a fairly small tree that you could do yourself, but once it gets on a larger scale, you may have to hire someone to come in with that type of equipment to excavate it with either air or some type of water. Yes, ma'am.
I'm on some acreage outside of Tyler and have a ton of trees, and I had some really good tree guys come out and formulated a team guy from this where anyway. And there was a big, it was an oak tree that was close to the house, and it had, soil was way up, there was no roof there. And there was a big discussion about it. And two of the long-time real tree guys voted to leave it like it was, because one of them said, this tree has been this way for so long, it is happy here, like this. And if you go digging around, more than likely you're going to disturb something that's going on in this tree.
Right.
So we left it instead of.
Yeah, it's all case dependent, and one of the favorite terms in forestry is it depends, because everything is so different. Our professors preach that to us, it depends. And there's not one answer for all cases, but in that case, maybe you could have done a little bit to kind of see how buried the root was, maybe it was just a little bit. So it's hard to tell, but I don't think it would ever be too bad of an idea to excavate the root collar just a little bit to kind of expose some of that flare. So. Okay, so this is very common. When planting a tree, you take it out of the pot and you see these circling roots. What you want to do is try and get these roots to where they're all facing outward, so they don't continue to circle in that pot. Or for the life of that tree. So if this tree was stuck in the ground, just like this, there's a good chance that those roots are just going to continue to circle, and they could possibly girdle that tree later in life. So you want to try and cut those roots to where they're kind of facing outward and promote proper root structure. Okay, this one's volcano mulching. You laugh, but you see it. You see it around Tyler.
Tyler, with our clay, what about the opposite? Is that just as bad? When you have when it's slightly lower than the ground level?
Explain a little bit more.
Well, I've seen instructions before on planting trees.
Uh-huh.
When you plant them, here's the soil, you dig out enough to where when the tree is setting in the ground, it's slightly lower than the soil around it, so it goes down a little bit.
You actually want it to be a little higher, yeah,
Okay.
and that's so the root flare is exposed. So if you have to side on one side, you want it just a little bit higher, but it all depends on how much.
The soil is higher, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, lower than around here. In other words, there's slight.
Yeah. You just kind of want to build it up to where it's level or slightly higher,
Okay.
for sure. And so, go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit, Rebecca,
Yeah.
a little bit about certain roots and the techniques, like shading them or whatever you try to
Yeah, I can go back. So, they've kind of gone back and forth on what they recommend. I've seen a lot of different things, but what you can do is you can take a knife. I'm going to draw it real quick. I know that's kind of hard to see, but you can take a knife and basically make 4 slices all the way around it and kind of loosen up those roots to where they're facing outwards, and then on the bottom you can also make like an X. And so that's one way that I've seen it done. You can also kind of kind of beat the root ball up a little bit and get those roots, you know, facing outward. So there's multiple ways to do it. If you have a real sharp shovel, you can shave the side of that root ball. So multiple ways to do it. The important thing is that these roots are facing outwards and kind of ready to grow. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's just so hard to do.
I know, it is, especially on the larger trees. Okay, this one, I mean, I drew all there, I erased it, but you can see that it's completely buried. That root is gonna, that root flare of the trunk is gonna continue to rot as the moisture, because that mulch is usually always wet, especially with irrigation. So you want to back that mulch off, just kind of scrape it off. And then this is the last one, improper, you know, staking and guying. It's recommended, and I'll talk about this here in a minute, but you can still ask questions. I have some methods on this, but you can see that this tree was beginning to grow around this wire and this little piece of rubber that was holding the tree up. So this indicates that it was likely just left on for way too long, and luckily they took it off, and this tree will be probably just fine. And because it's young trees, they respond really well. But typically, because I know someone's wondering, if you do use stakes that are above ground, how long should you leave it there? Well, if it needs it at all, you typically want to remove it after one growing season or whenever the tree is ready, so if not sooner. So if you notice that tree is swaying a lot, it needs some type of staking above ground. Try and remove it after a growing season, but if you notice it's just not strong enough yet, you can leave it on for longer. But don't leave it on for several years. So. Okay, and then reminder, we're still on human-caused issues here. String trimmer, lawn mowers, construction activities, vandalism, those are all stuff that are human-caused. To me, this looks like a string trimmer. So if you mow your own yard, you know, making sure that you're not hitting that tree with your weed eater, or if you have contractors that come out and mow your yard, just making it clear to them, hey, you know, be really careful around the trees.
The only way for that is to create a mulch tree.
Yeah, you're right.
The only way,
Yeah.
because you can tell them 100 times, and they'll still get it.
For sure.
I have a question similar to that. In our sprinkler system, you know, to go all the way around, it hits trees, and over time it hits the tree in the same place, and it does start to, is that going to eventually kill the tree or damage it? I don't know what to do about it.
I don't think that would kill the tree. It's definitely not great. I mean, you definitely don't want it getting the tree too wet, per se, but it's not the worst thing. You know, you're getting the trees watered, but you know, maybe look at some way that you could adjust it to where it's not hitting the tree. I know that's hard, but you know, anytime it's wet, it could cause, you know, invitation for fungus and for all these different types of things to kind of attack the tree. So I wouldn't say that would be the thing that kills it, but it could lead other things into the tree. So yes.
So if construction activities in your previous time, if a chunk of the bark is taken out, is there any way to help the tree seal it?
Yeah, so according to the manual for you know, it's basically what we study to become sort of an arborist, they don't recommend tree paint anymore unless it's for oak wilt. That's kind of the one exception. And so your question was, is there anything we can do? If it's a small tree, you can get like if it has jagged edges, you can get a knife or a real sharp blade and kind of trace around it just to make it a clean cut. That way it has better ability to seal up that wound. So if it's small, you can just kind of trace it out and just make it nice and clean, and that would help it a little bit. So.
And tree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. So her question was if a tree is damaged in construction as far as the trunk, what can you do to help that tree? Obviously, you can't put the bark back on place. So if the trunk has like jagged edges or it looks like it was ripped off or torn off, you can get some type of sharp knife or blade and cut around that wound just to have a nice clean edge and allow that tree to heal, to seal that wound faster. And human-caused competition. We love grass, it looks really good, I completely understand. And so on the left, this is what we see a lot, grass kind of up to the trunk of the tree. Grass requires a lot of water, and it also steals a lot of water from the trees. And so I look at this yard, it's, it has a nice ring of mulch and soil around each tree. And so there's no grass that you're stealing water or nutrients from these trees. So just kind of reducing competition is important for these trees.
Do you have a guidance on how far out it should go?
The guidance is as far as the canopy. So wherever, if you could, drop a string from the outside of the canopy, as far as that, but as far as you can, really is good. But I wouldn't go any further than outside the canopy. That's typically necessary. So. All right. Now my favorite one. Crepe murder. Improper horticultural practices. We have topping, line tailing, over-fertilization, misuse of herbicides, and right here we have crepe myrtle that was murdered, per se, right here. So this is that same picture from earlier. This does look like a Bradford pear. So this tree was topped, and even though I don't like them, it's still not good for the tree. And so there's a couple issues with topping a tree. So number one, you're removing all, in this case, you remove majority of, the leaves from the tree. And so this tree has to dip into its energy stores to produce all the foliage back on this tree. So it's kind of taking a hit out of its energy stores out of the tree to put these leaves back on, grow new branches. And then additionally, you have kind of a weak structure. All the branches that are going to grow from all these cuts, I mean, there's probably 100 cuts on this tree, are going to be kind of weakly attached, and so you risk breakage in the future from the areas where it grows off. And then lastly, you have 100 entry points for anything, insects, diseases. So just not good for the tree, stresses the tree out. So don't do this.
What was the thought process behind that decision?
Well,
Or the reason why?
in my opinion, well, this one is more than likely, they just like the look of it. And once it's grown in. Yeah, I don't know. This again is not my picture, but there's two trains of thoughts. Either they thought this was the correct way to do it, or they really wanted their tree to look like this. And in that case, it can be okay to top a tree if you're going to do it every single year, if you really want it to look that way. So if you have a crepe myrtle and you just like the way that it looks topped, then more power to you. There's really nothing wrong with doing that. If you do it every year, it's your tree, you can do as you please. But as far as the health of the tree, this is not a recommended practice at all. So, and
If you've got to reduce the length of limbs over the crown, how would you go about doing that? Let's say they needed to do that, maybe because there was a power line above.
yeah.
What would be the best way of doing that? Obviously, if the right tree in the right place would have been a good place to start. But now that you've got it there, what can you do to
Yeah,
keep the tree
that's a good
close?
question. So if you have a tree that the canopy needs to be lowered for some reason, whether it's your house, your carport, power lines, overhead, something, a bridge, it has to be lowered. What's the correct way to do that? Well, I would say the correct way to do that is do it as early as possible. Don't put it off. And number two is I would hire a certified arborist that can go in and make individual cuts at the proper places of this tree to try and reduce reduce strain on this tree. So every tree is different. There's no, I say, one size fits all for the tree, but hiring a professional to come out and kind of inspect that tree, make all the right cuts, and then doing it as early as possible.
You mean early as possible in the life of the tree?
That's correct, yeah. Just do it as quick as you can. If you know you're going to have issues, do it as soon as you kind of train that tree to maybe grow somewhere other than where it's growing.
Okay, so is it a false statement that, so my Bradford pears were trimmed some.
Hey, it happens.
And, because the person who was an experienced person, I felt like it in business a long time, But they were afraid they were going to get so top heavy that it would cause the tree to split if we had high winds or like the ice storms.
Well, it makes a good point. Bradford pears are notorious for splitting. And anybody in here knows that, and if you don't, Bradford pears are notorious for splitting. You see a lot of them that just half the trunk is gone because they split. And so that could be a train of thought that, maybe reducing some weight. And that actually is a practice in certain instances. If you have a tree that has a big codominant stem, reducing some weight is a proper practice to get some weight off of those branches. Now, just topping it may not be the best way to do it. Kind of doing it in a way that's strategic would probably be a little bit better, but not entirely wrong in what he said. So this is a tree that looks like it was pruned. You can hardly even tell. It looks really good. So whenever I talk about pruning, this is kind of what you want it to look like. You really don't want to be able to tell that a tree was pruned very much. Looks like there's no dead branches, so this is just a picture of what properly pruned trees look like. All right, number 2. Has anybody seen this before?
Maybe.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
In
Yeah.
real life? You mean?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, everybody's seen this. So I see it in Tyler all the time. This tree was pruned what we call lion tailing. All the inner foliage was removed, and it kind of leaves little poofs that look like a lion tail at the end of the branch. Number 1, not acceptable practice. And so you would ask, why would someone want this done? Okay, my first train of thought is this, that, well, you're paying $1,000 for a crew to come out and prune a tree. I want to see that trailer full. I want to see something. That's understandable, right? Like, hey, I just paid you $1,000. Why is your trailer, why can I not see it heaping out of your trailer? So let me go back to sometimes a pruning is not even noticeable, right? So you don't have to see a huge pile of limbs on the ground or a trailer full of limbs to know that it was done correctly. Okay? And then...
Doesn't that leave that tree more susceptible to wind damage because you've taken so much of the interior?
It does. So there's kind of like a tree has a dampening effect, is what I learned, and all the foliage kind of works together in the movement of that tree. And so you have all this weight at the very end. You get a big wind, it causes the end of that tree to really push over and could cause breakage. It ruins the structure of the tree, and then it forces trees to use stored carbohydrates due to too much leaf area removed. And then those areas that are empty, they're going to grow back. So either you're going to have to do this every year, every other year to keep it looking like that if you want it to look like that, or just don't do it at all. And then also it can cause sun scald on the top of the branches. You have these branches that have never really been exposed to that much sunlight, and then you remove all those limbs, and it can cause sun scald on the tree, cause stress. So.
Luke, when that's been done, is it a useless point to even keep the tree? What can you do?
I think that you
It's
can.
going to grow back.
Yeah, I think if this was done and you don't want to do it again, I think the best thing to do would to let the tree, grow. Let it kind of come back on the structure. I mean, it'll probably never be the exact same as it was, but the best thing you could do, in my opinion, would be to just allow this tree to grow and to, replace all that foliage that it lost. So that would be my opinion on that.
A comment, I live in a rural setting, and she does with
Okay.
200-year-old post oaks,
Uh-huh.
post oaks, my arborist, but it's stressed like she was talking about in her house. He called them suckers coming off the trunk, and he said, leave them, most foliage, and most people are some tree person that doesn't know the trees would have cut off all those trunk suckers.
Yeah, it depends, but typically if the tree is healthy, I recommend removing the suckers because, especially in our parks, we have to have those trees up to a certain level so people can walk underneath them, mow underneath them, and do all this stuff in the park. So I recommend removing them if your tree is healthy. If your tree is putting those out because of some reason,
Because it's wind stress.
right, there may be something else to look at. That may not be your biggest issue, right? So if your tree is putting out a lot of those on the trunk, there may be some other issues that you may need to look into. But sometimes they just do that, and it's okay to remove those as long as it's not.
No, it doesn't add more, they just get longer, and I
Yeah, yeah.
trim, like you were talking about, the little bit of other.
Yeah, yeah.
My tree guy said if they're growing out.
I agree with
down,
what you said, to let the tree begin to recover and reform its crown, but you may end up with the same issue that drove the homeowner to want to thin it out, or worse, because of the suckers that are going to be all over the tree. So what you're going to want to do is help the tree reform its crown. If you're going to be removing a lot of that new growth coming in and keeping a limb about every 2 to 3 feet to put new leaves out to feed the tree, but also to fill in that space in there to keep the limbs from being jerked around by the wind.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you, Daniel. And so what he said is basically, if this tree is going to start, putting new limbs, all new leaves and new limbs all along this to replace what was lost. And so what you could do is, leave one here, leave one there, instead of leaving all of them. And so if you really do want this tree to get back into the way it was, you need to promote proper branch structure and kind of pick the branches you want and leave those. So, all right. We already talked about this, but it's very common, and I include this in my slide multiple times because it is important. Do not volcano mulch, really, really bad for the trees. So this is what it should look like. You can see that this root flare right here. You can see that it's not too thick of mulch, no competition. So this is kind of an ideal scenario.
Could I ask on that slide, if you've already got grass growing up to a tree, can you just put mulch over the grass? Or is that sufficient, or can you dig out the grass?
I would recommend digging out the grass. Grass is pretty resilient, and usually it'll grow right through that mulch unless you just put a lot. And so, we typically recommend anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of mulch, good mulch layer. So I would remove the grass, with a a little hoe or something like that, just to remove the grass and then put mulch. So, yeah. All right, prevention.
How do you feel about pine needles as a mulch around the tree?
Okay, her question was, how do I feel about pine needles? They work great. Pine needles work great. So just kind of your preference on whether you like hardwood mulch, pine needles, cedar bark mulch. So completely up to your preference.
What about dyed?
I recommend staying away from dyed mulch. Just, yep. Her question was dyed mulch. How do I feel about that? I would recommend staying away from dyed mulch. Just try and get you a nice hardwood mulch. That should work really well. All right. So this is really what I think is one of the most important things of the whole talk is the right tree in the right place. We can do all these things, but if we don't put the right tree in the right place, the tree could be set up for disaster in the future. So, this is a nice picture of a nice lawn. Looks like all the trees were kind of properly selected. And so we want to think about a couple things before we plant trees. I know that we have favorite trees and we really, really want them in our yard, but sometimes it just won't work. Will the tree bump into anything when it's fully grown? Then you need to look at the tree. How wide will the tree grow? Do I want the tree to lose its leaves or not? Can this area even support this type of tree with the amount of sunlight, soil space, soil type? Is there irrigation? Does it thrive in your hardiness zone? Do you want fruit? All these questions you need to be asking yourself before a tree is planted to determine if that is the right tree for the right place. So just any time that you're looking at planting a tree, just kind of look up, down, around, and make sure that your site is, that your tree is good for that site. So this is just really, really important. Spend a lot of time doing this. And if you have questions, make a phone call to a certified arborist and just ask them. They may be able to come out and take a look, give you a suggestion. Okay, so here's some guidelines. The next slide, I'll have some guidelines on watering. This from what I found. So you always want to water deeply. You don't want to, try and water every day. You want to try and water deeply. So you can use soaker hoses. You can use a garden hose, a gator bag, and so these trees are going to need supplemental water for the first couple of years. And you also want to avoid fertilization. These trees are trying to establish their root system. And what can happen is if you apply fertilization too early, these trees respond with a lot of growth, and then they're not able to support that growth in the summer with the limited root system that they have. So avoid fertilizations for maybe a year or so, and then you can fertilize if it needs it, right? Do a soil test.
Stimulators okay though, right?
Yeah, there are some root stimulators that would be okay. Mainly the up top, you want to try and limit that.
How do you define a young tree?
I don't know, I guess that's kind of subjective, but a young tree I would define as, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years or younger, something that was recently planted. It kind of depends, but I would, I think a young tree when you see it. It's so.
5 years in its permanent site, because we don't really know how old they are when we purchase them.
I would say newly planted tree. I may be saying young tree, but a newly planted tree.
What if you're going to have trees planted? You determine young and old, young tree by the size of the tree.
Yeah, so obviously the size of the trunk and the size of the tree is going to determine kind of the age of the tree most of the time. So I say young tree, I just mean kind of smaller, less mature trees. So I have it in the next slide. Yep. All right, so you can take a picture of this, write it down, however you want to do. From everything that I've found, this is generally a good guideline for watering your trees after planting. So it doesn't matter if the tree is in a 5-gallon pot or a 60-gallon pot, this applies. So you want to do a slow soak every 7 days for about 4 weeks, okay? And then in November through February, you want to slow soak about every 3 weeks. And October, March, and April, okay, yeah, so you can read it, but the main thing is adjust based on the rainfall. Just because there's this guideline, if we're getting a lot of rain, you might want to, take that watering back because actually one of the biggest issues with watering is not underwatering, but actually overwatering. Most trees in an urban setting are overwatered, and so just adjust based on rainfall. If it's really dry, maybe kick it up a little bit. If it's really wet, then tone back your watering for sure. Okay, watering devices. This should be the answer. So on the left, these are called tree gators. You can typically get them in a 2-pack, and they're about $46 on Amazon. And they're really easy, really simple to use. You can use these after planting, and then you can also use them during the summertime when it's real hot if you're in a drought, so you don't have to go out and water it every single day. And so what this is it's a big plastic bag that you fill with water. And if you can see, I know it's not real big, but you can see there's little water droplets coming out right here. It just slowly drips water to this, and I can't remember how long that this drips water for. Daniel, do you remember how long these typically drip for?
I really don't.
But it's quite a long. It's a good amount of time.
It's a real easy tool to use, but if you look at that begins to emulate the volcano mulching. And it doesn't allow that moisture to dry out at the root collar along the tree trunk. I'm not trying to knock the product. I mean, it delivers the water. You don't have to fill it every day, which is nice. But at least with the ooze tube, you've got airspace around the tree trunk.
Yeah, so this is not something you want to leave on all year round. You put it on when you need water, you take it off. It zips up and down. You can put 1, 2, or 3 bags on there, even 4 on larger trees.
People realize that's a zipper.
It is a zipper, yep. So this
So
is,
that's several that have been zipped
this
together.
is a zipper. There's a zipper on this side, so yeah, this is actually, I think, 4 bags all zipped together. But you have to have a minimum of 2 to make a circle. So, zip it up in a circle. These work really well, but like I said, not something you want to leave on all year. Okay, and then this is a similar device. just a different manufacturer, different type, drips water, doesn't go as high, and you can see that there's some airflow in here, which is good. So just some options, so you don't have to go out and water that tree all the time. Okay, and then that was watering young trees. This is watering mature trees. You want to check the soil, right? You want your tree to be dependent upon itself. You don't want to have this tree relying on your water all the time. So you want to kind of dig down 2 inches, use a screwdriver, and if the soil is moist, then likely the tree it has enough water. But if it's really dry or hard, then maybe you need to go out and up the watering a little bit. So you can use soaker hoses, which water real slow, garden hose. You can use a sprinkler, and you want to do about 1 inch of water if it needs it. And so during a drought, you want to make sure to water about once a week, and again, check the soil, but and just continue to water and monitor. Mature trees, we want them to be self-sufficient. We don't want to have to take care of these trees all the time as far as going out and watering. We want them to be to live on their own and to have their own root system. And yeah, so just kind of monitor that for mature trees. So here's this soaker hose I've been talking about. You can see that it just kind of oozes water out of this hose. And then you have a conventional sprinkler. This is not ideal because it's probably getting on the base of, the kind of the trunk of this tree. But this may be during a drought and they're just trying to get some water to it in a slow fashion. So, and what I was talking about in the previous slide, the tuna can, you can set a empty tuna can and let's see. And you want to do about 1 inch of water. So once there's about 1 inch of water in the tuna can, that's probably a good watering for that tree. Mulching, remove grass, weeds, and vegetation. Apply 2 to 3 inches of quality mulch, shredded hardwood, pine bark, pine needles. Avoid piling on the base, and then replace as needed. You can go in there and kind of scrape it up, and if it's starting to have weeds in it. Staking, below ground staking is preferred to above ground staking, and because the reason for this is it allows the canopy and trunk to sway and develop properly. We want this tree to sway in the wind. We want it to develop that wood at the base of the tree to support itself throughout the life of the tree. And so if we have a stake above ground holding this tree in place and it never moves, well, what do we think is going to happen as soon as we take off that stake? Well, it's not used to the wind. It's not used to all these factors, blowing it around. It's more likely to be kind of weak or snap. And so I'll show you these devices. So this one is called Arborist stakes. That's the name of the product, and we use these pretty frequently. And what these do are, this would be the root ball of the tree, right? You just bought this tree from the nursery. This is the root ball. You stuck it in the ground, the hole you dug. And what this does is it's a wooden stake which will decompose. It drove through the root ball into the existing soil that has not been disturbed, okay? And then these plastic pieces right here sit down on the root ball and hold the root ball in place from moving, but it also allows that tree to sway, which is beneficial for the development of the tree. These are about $30 a tree, maybe a little bit more, and it does not require removal, but you could go in and remove these after some time if you really wanted to. And then you can get a little handsaw and just cut these little nubs off and then cover them with mulch, and you're done. So that's what we recommend if it needs it. Not every tree that's planted has to be staked, so only if it needs it.
Like 3 foot
They're about that tall. I don't know how long that, but it's really easy to do. It's really not that hard to do. We do it all the time, and so not every tree requires staking too. That's important. So when you plant this tree and you use this type of staking system, you can move that tree, you can move it, but it's not coming out of the ground if you did it right. So they're really cool products. This is the next one. It's called Root Anchor. And so kind of same concept. What you have is you have stakes, like you have a piece of wood or rebar that's driven into the outside, and it's a little bit harder to do. and then you have this metal ring that holds that root ball in place. So the main thing is we want the root ball to stay in place and allow that tree to sway. So the only thing about this one is this metal ring does have to be removed, because I've seen trees begin to grow around this ring, which is not good for the structure of the tree or the health of it. So if you do use this, just remember that you did use it and remove it.
Luke, I have a
Yes.
question about that picture.
Yep.
So the bark at the base of that tree, you know how it kind of looks like it's cracking and stuff? Is that normal?
So this looks normal to me. This looks like normal, just kind of expansion of the tree. That looks normal to me. That doesn't look like any concern to me. Her question was, does the cracking look abnormal? To me, it does not. All right, so now we've talked about staking the tree. Next thing you want to do is pruning. So this is just a kind of a guide on how to prune. And so pruning a large limb, you want to make this first cut, which is the undercut, and then you want to make the second cut, and this limb should just snap right off. And then you want to make this third cut right at the the branch collar, and allow that tree to heal. And so the reason, or to seal that wound. And so the reason that you want to do this 3-cut method is that some trees are prone to that bark ripping down the tree. So if you just come in here and start from the top, once you get to about right there, that branch is going to break and could rip that bark all the way down the tree. So this is why this method is important. You make that undercut, and then you make that top cut and breaks it off, and then you make that last cut with no weight on the branch. So feel free to take pictures or anything you'd like to. All right, so we talked about construction. Well, what can we do to protect a tree during construction? The biggest thing we want to do is protect the soil during construction. And so we want to create what's called a tree protection zone. You'll hear referred to as a TPZ. And this is an area where construction activities are restricted. You don't go in, you don't take the fence down, you don't store anything in there. Nothing goes inside of this fence. And so ideally, you want to have 1 foot for every 1 inch of trunk diameter. So if, let's just say that this tree was 25 inches at breast height, you want to have 25 foot to protect that tree. Or, just to make it easier, you want to have this fence all the way out to the edge of the canopy. So that makes it really easy. But realistically, that's not always possible, so you just want to try and do as much as you can to protect those roots, make sure they're not getting compacted, nothing's getting spilled on it, mulch and soil isn't getting piled on top of it. But if this is not possible, if you cannot install this fence for some reason, another method is to put a very, very thick layer of mulch around this tree. So if there's trucks or equipment or ATVs driving, they're driving on kind of a top of a spongy layer of mulch, and then when they're done with construction, you can remove all that mulch to lessen the impact of the construction and compaction. But this is ideal here. We do this on all our parks whenever we redo a park and put new playground equipment and sidewalks. We install fences around all the trees that are going to be kind of in that construction zone. But it's very hard to keep them out of there. All right, so pruning tools. Here's what I recommend. You want to make sure that you get some type of bypass pruners, bypass loppers. That means that the blade is bypassing, it's not crushing that limb. And so they're relatively cheap, 21 bucks on Amazon. You can get some nice loppers, Corona loppers for $60 on Amazon or Lowe's or Home Depot. These are for doing kind of smaller branches when the tree is smaller, when the tree is young. Well, once those branches get a little bit larger, you can get into the hand saws, things that we can do ourselves. So Silky, Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of like the top of the line brand of hand saws that a lot of people recommend. I think they're some type of Japanese hand saw. They're kind of expensive. You don't have to do this one, I just put it on there. And so you can get these like on Cheryl Tree, the website. This little hand saw with the sheath is about 75 bucks, and you can cut a limb as large as you can with that. It can get pretty tiring. And then you can have basically this on a pole, on a hand pole, Works really well. The reason that I like these is you can be extremely accurate with these and you don't get in a rush. Sometimes with the pole saws that are gas powered or even electric powered, you can get a little carried away and they're not as fine. You know, the blade on this is real thin, but sometimes the pole saws that are electric or gas can be real thick, and it's harder to make accurate cuts. So I like using these, have one in the back of my truck at all times, and I'll just go out and do some pretty cuts with these. And then obviously, we know of chainsaws, but I always kind of recommend starting on Arborist or somebody come out and do those if you can, or if you need it done. All right, so I want to show you all this. This is a really cool website from the Texas A&M Forest Service. It's called TreeMD. And basically you can use it to give you a little bit better idea of what may be going on with your tree. So if you want to find this, just go to Google and look up TreeMD. And so I'll give you all a little tour of it, how to use it. All right, so here we have, this is a crepe myrtle. We know it's a crepe myrtle, and we know that the branches are turning black, the leaves are turning black. You know, what's going on with my tree? Why is this happening? So, if you look up TreeMD, it'll bring you to this website. So there's a big white button that says diagnose. I prefer to go by the tree species. It narrows it down a little bit more. So we know that was a crepe myrtle. We know that the bark is turning black. The leaves are turning black. So what's up with my tree? Why is this happening? Okay. I bragged on it a little bit too much. You're gonna have to report this, Daniel. All right, here it goes. So what we can scroll through the list and find our species, or we can just select this drop down and scroll it again, or we can just type in crepe myrtle. So there we go. It's not going to be super specific, it's going to be kind of broad. Okay, it's thinking here. All right, well, we have it in the canopy and the trunk. We can select either one. I guess I'll just select trunk. So it's the only thing is it doesn't narrow it down a whole lot, right? You get a lot of these, but we know it's not root rot. We know it's not soil compaction. We know it's not mechanical. We know it's not lightning damage. We know it's not improper mulching or frost cracking. But I do see one that looks kind of like that. And so I press on that, and it gives us, well, if we go back to that picture, it had little white specks all over it. So this looks like it would be it. And so it gives you more information on it. So you can see that in this picture that, you know, the bark is dark in a way, and so that looks exactly like ours. So I'd be willing to bet that's what we got. And it gives treatment, you know, using soapy water, soft little brush, in May and July, systemic insecticide. So this is a really cool website. If you have something wrong with your tree, I wouldn't substitute it for hiring a certified arborist to figure out what's wrong with your tree. But for something as simple as this, you know, maybe this is all that it takes, and or just to give you a better idea of what's going on with your tree. So really like this website. I would definitely check it out. Okay. All right, back here. Okay, and then lastly, hiring professional. I've got a little bit over time, I apologize. So when in doubt, consult with a professional. Certified arborist for pruning, soil amendments, tree inspections, fertilization, removals. Most of them kind of do it all. And so the question is, how do I know if the person that I hired is a certified arborist? Well, it's pretty simple. Ask for their certification number. For example, mine is TX4982A. It's going to look something like that. If they're in Texas, it's going to say TX. Louisiana would say LA, I think is what Louisiana is. And so just ask for the certification number. And there's this Find an Arborist tool. I'm going to go real quick. So if you look up on Google, Arborist search tool or Find an Arborist, it'll bring you to this website. And what you'll do is you'll click here on Find an Arborist. And it'll bring you to here. You can verify a credential or you can find professionals in your area. So, for example, if they just told you their name or their certification number, I'll use that. Okay, and so it brings up my name, it brings up, I'm a certified arborist, I'm tree risk assessment qualification, where I'm at. And yeah, so it's really easy. So there's really no way that it should be, anybody should be telling you something that's not true, because you can just search it up. Okay, and then lastly, just ensure that they perform the visit. This is important. We have, sometimes you'll get tree companies that say certified arborist on staff. Well, that doesn't really do you much good if they're not the ones performing the visit. So make sure that they are the ones performing the visit. Make sure it's a certified arborist. Just because they say certified arborist on staff does not mean that's the person who's visiting your home or your tree. So final tips and takeaways, make sure you have the right tree in the right place. Have kind of a watering schedule. Make sure the mulching is correct. It's really good for the tree. And do proper pruning and hire professionals when you need help. So thank you all very much for being here. I hope that I didn't bore y'all too much. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Luke. Wow, I learned a lot. That volcano mulch was really something. We dug around all of our trees when we first moved in. Want to talk about this? Dr. Grant's here. So.
Great. Please, if you can, we've made them short for you. Fill out an evaluation form because Texas A&M AgriLife wants us to prove that our master gardeners are educating the public, and so.
Please be honest. I like your feedback. After the last presentation, I had some feedback and made some changes, so please be honest on there if there's something you liked or didn't like.
We're not actually evaluating him, we're evaluating our educational efforts. So even if you did a crappy job, the fact that the master gardeners are trying to teach, so this is, it's pretty much all our evaluations are similar. What did you know about the subject before you got here? What did you know about the subject after you heard the talk? And so certainly you did a great job. And then you, and what do you plan to implement the things that you learned? And if you have time, you can fill out the information on the back if it's applicable. It takes a minute or less, that as well. So, speaking of volcano mulching, I saw Walmart the other day, the same ones that were replacing half their dead red tip photinias had already butchered their crepe myrtles, and they've done volcano mulching with large rocks. And it's just the most bizarre thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you can crank stupidity up even another notch. And so I think Gail has a few things for you.
Thank you. While you're doing your evaluations, and while we have you here, just a couple of announcements about our home garden tours. The Smith County Master Gardeners do an annual home garden tour, and this year it's scheduled Saturday, May 17th. It's usually in between Mother's Day and Memorial Day. So we have we'll save the date cards at the back, and this actually is we do charge a little bit for this. We have 5 gardens this year that I think will demonstrate some of the Earth Kind principles that are part of our educational program to the public. So you'll learn and you'll get to look at some beautiful gardens. So the next thing is that this year the Master Gardeners are going to be in the azalea trails. Actually, we're going to be in the Tyler Rose Garden during the azalea trails event, and we'll be there March 22nd, 29th, and April 5th. And we will be conducting tours in the Botanic Garden at the Rose Center to meet our public and talk about and answer any questions that you might have about the plants, landscaping, and the local history in the Tyler Botanic Gardens. And then I think someone else had brought a flyer about community gardens. I don't know if they're still here, but if you'd like to talk a little bit about them, they're not Smith County Master Gardeners, but anybody?
Yeah.
Here she is.
Ah,
Hello, so we're here on behalf of ETX Public Gardens. We're very new here, and right now we're essentially looking for volunteers to help us start a community garden here in Tyler. So we're hoping to try to get it at the library, but we're not sure yet. Everything's still in the works. But if you could donate like time, supplies, or even knowledge, just if you have expertise on how to, like, when to grow certain foods and tips, anything you have. I have flyers. There's also a QR code, and it'll ask for your email, and we could go ahead and send out an email whenever we're ready to start having volunteers. So if you're interested, you can meet with me, or back there in the tan jacket, raising his hand, he has flyers as well. So yeah, thank you.
thank you very much. Community Gardens. Thank y'all for coming. Okay, I think that's everything that we have today, and I hope you enjoyed our program. Next month, oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I have a question about those tours on the 22nd, 29th of March. Are we going to have a pre-training for those of us who may have actually never given a tour, like me?
You'll have to check with Joanna.
We will.
Oh,
Yeah.
are we going to have to? Okay.
That's a Master Gardener question, not a public question. But yes, we have a tour coordinator, and you should check with that tour coordinator, Joanna Damskroger, for that. Yes, it's March 22nd, 29th, and April 5th. That's what I was going to say. Wow. Got the question. Next month, March 21st, again the 21st, that's the third Friday, we will have Dr. Garrett Slater. Dr. Slater is new in at the Research Center, and he's a bee specialist, and he's going to be talking about getting started with bees, the fundamental of beekeeping. So I have heard him. He is an excellent speaker, and you won't want to miss this. You just learn a lot about bees, even if you don't plan to keep them. But please come out for that next month, 12 to 1. Now, our seating starts at 11:30, and we try to start this from 12 to 1. So I'm telling everybody because our information has been the same way for several years, but we don't actually start until 12 o'clock. So some people come out really early so they can get a good seat. So if you don't mind waiting, that's okay, but I don't want you to feel like you have to be here at 11. So anyway, thank you all very much. Try to stay warm, and I hope you learned a little bit about trees.